on, make them know what go on. Lead the way, lead the way. You understand? Breadman TV, run thing.
Hey, and now, good morning, Chuck. How you doing?
Good morning.
Okay, now I can clearly say that the district attorney probably here overcharged this officer. And like you just mentioned, Ms. Scalacci, that if they're charged for reckless endangerment, maybe we would have gotten a conviction here. Now, Chuck, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. And
okay.
Thanks for having me.
Explain to the listening audience your position. You served within the NYPD for years, correct?
Yes. I joined the police department back in 1984, and I retired in 2004. While on the police department, I fought against the police department about the policies that were implemented in the minority neighborhoods, because I knew right then and there were going to be a problems, because there's two types of policing. And what I mean by that is when you go south of 96th Street, you have a Caucasian population, and the police usually give them every benefit of the doubt. But north of 96th Street, minorities don't get the benefit of the doubt. So there's a different type of police in there, you know. And while I was on the police department, I joined two organizations, one of them being the 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care.
Eric Garner.
And the National Latino Officers Association. And what those two organizations did is, again, organizational-wise, we fought against the policies of NYPD. And because we did that, we were sort of, I would say ostracized by the department, because we were looked at as these guys are not part of the team. And since they're not part of the team, right, we have to really watch them. And being part of the team is going along to get along, you know, and we refused to do that, because when we raised our right hand, right, we raised it to uphold the laws of the state. And we weren't going to just go out there and brutalize and violate people's rights just because the police department had others that wanted us to do that.
Now, Chuck, when you look at the evidence, when you look at the situation, and, you know, I said to someone earlier on that when I heard noted attorney Alan Dershowitz, who was on the O.J. Simpson case and is now a law professor at one of these Ivy League colleges, when I heard him mention that when did selling loose cigarette in New York City became a crime, and you know, we discussed this amongst ourselves. Give the man a ticket. But when you look at the chokehold and how the chokehold was done, how it was applied, you know, I am saying that this officer, he was just standing there observing the scene and saying, I'm waiting for this opportune time to grab this man around his neck. The police commissioner said that chokehold has been taken out of the books of the NYPD. The city medical examiner, and not only one, two, said that whatever this officer did contributed to Eric Garner's death. It's an homicide. And
exactly.
Yes.
And going back to what you said first, in my whole 20 years as a New York City police officer, detective, I have never locked anybody up for any untaxed cigarettes. Now, again, cigarettes is like a federal crime. NYPD, as long as I was on, I never known anybody to lock anybody up. Just like for cigarettes, just like the postal. Like if you have someone breaking in a mailbox, the police technically cannot really lock you up for doing that. But what they can do, and what I've had, when I've had cases where people said that their neighbor was breaking into their postal, you have to refer that to the Postal Service.
Yes.
And they have their own law enforcement agency that will come out and make the arrest. Now, you can work in conjunction with them. But in this particular case, that's why I went on the books, too, and I said, listen, I don't even think they were supposed to make an arrest for untaxed cigarettes because it has never been done. But then when you mentioned something about the officer waiting for opportune time, yes, and that's what I've been telling people. When you look at that video, right, if the officer once you make up your mind to arrest someone, now you can ascertain that backup is coming when you feel a threat level that you may not be able to affect this arrest properly. Right. Yeah, you call for backup, and once you know that backup is coming, that's when you might implement the arrest. All right. In this particular case, what that officer did, what both officers did, was they waited for sufficient backup to come. During that time that backup was coming, that would have been the perfect time to say, listen, Mr. Garner, I just called for backup. You are going to be arrested. So whether we arrest you right now, which would be the easy way, and you just turn around, put your hands behind your back, and let us put these handcuffs on you because we're waiting for transportation also, because I didn't see their car. I don't know if they had a car there. Or when backup arrives, sir, right, we are going to arrest you any way we know how. And if that means 5 or 6 officers jumping on you, that's what's going to happen. They could have explained that to him. And I don't know what they were saying, because the person who was recording it, at certain times you can only be but so close. And I tell people at least 20 feet, because what the police will use is that when you're recording them and catching them in a bad light,
obstructing.
What they're going to do now is they're going to arrest you, so that they can get possession of your recording device, so that they can somehow break it, or it becomes missing, and they arrest you for disorderly conduct, or interfering in a police matter, which also is against the department guidelines, which I'm going to read to you, because a person can film the police while they're doing their work, because the news does it all the time.
Okay, go ahead, Chuck, read that.
Okay, you want me to read that to you right away? Okay. Yeah. It's called Observers at the Scene of Police Incidents. As a rule, when a police officer stops, detains, or arrests a person in a public area, persons who happen to be in or are attached to the area are naturally in position to and are allowed to observe the police officer's actions. This right to observe is, of course, limited by reasons of safety to all concerned. And as long as there is no substantive violation of law, the following guidelines should be utilized by members of the service whenever the above situation exists. And it's for this: a person remaining in the vicinity of a stop or arrest shall not be subject to arrest for obstruction governmental administration, which is a penal law section 195.05, unless the officer has probable cause to believe that the person or persons is obstructing governmental administration, which means if the person is trying to prevent the arrest, or if the person is trying to help the person who's being arrested get away, you know, that's obstructing. All right? So, therefore, what I just read to you, right, is a violation of the police procedure, which says to the police officers, and all of them get in training, when you are arresting someone, the public has the right to watch you, and they have a right to film you.
Okay, we're going to hold...
to add, just let me add this. None of the following constitutes probable cause for arrest or detention of an onlooker unless the safety of the officers or person is directly in danger, or the officer reasonably believes they are in danger, or the law is otherwise violated. Now this, speech alone, even though crude and vulgar, which means that a person at the scene of someone being arrested could say, the onlooker could say, hey, officer, he or she did nothing wrong. Why don't you leave them alone? Now, you can say that. You can yell that. All right? And you can yell obscenities, which I don't condone. Okay? But I'm just making a point. So that covers the speech. Now, look at this. Requesting and making notes of shield numbers and names of members of the service, which means that an onlooker could say to the police officer,
I'm taking your shield number.
I want your name. I want your shield number. But I tell people all the time, do not ask the officer for his name and shield. It's right there being displayed. Just look at him. Look at the shield. Write it down. Look at the name. Now,
Chuck, 1 second. We're going to hold it right there for a minute, because I want to go back to Ms. Kalachi here. Yes. Now, John, when we look at the federal prosecutor coming in now, do you feel comfortable that something different is going to happen at the end of this?
Well, it's going to depend on their investigation. Right now, they're indicating there's going to be a federal civil rights violation investigation. And one thing I want to, well, two things. We represent actually a lot of officers down at One Police Plaza in their departmental hearings, and I'm sure Chuck is fully familiar with that process. And I actually want to commend him on work he's done with the Latino Officers Association, because officers at One Police Plaza, they too get put through the system, so to speak, and there's disparate treatment for minority officers. And so it's going to be interesting to see, departmentally wise, the charges for Officer Pantaleo that are in connection with this, because just because there's no indictment doesn't mean he also shouldn't be held accountable down at One Police Plaza with the NYPD. So it's going to be interesting to see what charges come about for him, and what modification of his duty or suspension or otherwise that may come from this, and what kind of treatment he gets with regards to that. And with the federal investigation, I also want to point out, when there is what's called a no true bill, which means there's no indictment, that doesn't, and it's not a grand jury indictment, it's not a conviction. So I want to make that clear. That's at trial. This is just to say, does the prosecutor have the green light? Do they have probable cause? There really needs to be a revamping, because in the federal system, even when someone's arrested on an indictment, you have what's called a preliminary hearing, and that's a probable cause hearing. And that's where you get to cross-examine the officers or the agents involved, the confidential informants, and you get to challenge it at an early stage. And it would be in the best interest of the criminal justice system if the grand jury proceedings were like that, and like that nationwide, to have some uniformity. Well, because some states do have that, but in New York we don't have that. You get to challenge the indictment later on through hearings and then eventually through trial. But it really should be more how the federal system is. You can get a preliminary hearing and sometimes even beat the case at the preliminary hearing. The other thing, too, is...
Real quick, Joan, in the essence of time. Go ahead, real quick.
Yes. Just because of no true bill, that doesn't mean that the prosecutors can't represent. It just means that this grand jury didn't indict. And this might be the time for a call for a special prosecutor, because remember, district attorney position is a political position. And the climate of any given jurisdiction, Staten Island, Bronx, Kings, Manhattan, what have you, is a political position, and no one should forget that. And this might be the time for a special prosecutor to come in and represent and present full charges, and some charges for reckless endangerment. There were words about manslaughter being charged, but was it involuntary manslaughter or voluntary manslaughter? Because there's different elements to each.
We're going to hold it there, John, because the computers are going to take over at the top of the hour. But it's going to be an ongoing conversation. I thank both of you, Chuck, Joan Scalacci, for your contribution this morning.
Yes, thank you.
And thank
you for having us.
And this segment was made possible by you, the community, who continue to support businesses like the Door and the Smokehouse Restaurant and Kingston Corner Shop. They paid for this segment, and we learned a lot this morning.
Yes,
certainly, I hope you did learn a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry we could not take any calls in this segment, but Chuck, we're going to have you back. Miss Scalacci, we're going to have you back.
Definitely.
Certainly. Have a blessed day, and we thank you both for joining us this morning. Take care.
Thank you, Rascliffe.
But I'm not I'm lucky because I want to beat him if I never have the camera. I truly don't know.
Bread man, make myself your lively, is that a dead man.